For those of you who don't know me, I want to say welcome. And I am Yorona Boster, certified speaker and communications coach, life coach, speaker, author, podcaster, and more. And I love helping people communicate with purpose and integrity with themselves and with all those around them. Before our guest introduces herself, I'm going to clear my throat for a moment. Excuse me, because that's human and we all have to do it. But I have a request for anyone listening or watching. As this series continues, I would love your input for communication topics that interest you. You see, it's my belief that communication runs deep, a lot deeper than we usually think when it comes to surface level thoughts. So don't be afraid to stretch the limits of where and how communication shapes your life. And then please feel free to DM me any of your ideas or drop them in the comments. Even email them to me at yorona@yoronaboster.com. All right, Maggie. So please, would you tell our audience a little bit about yourself before we jump into our conversation?
Absolutely. So thank you again, Yorona, so much for having me. Everybody who's tuning in, thank you so much for joining us. We have a really good conversation and timely as we are in the height of the holiday season. I am a trilingual marketing and events professional, years of experience across hospitality, brand strategy, and global events. And I'm in the midst of pitching a TED Talk. And Rona Boster has been instrumental to getting me ready for the stage. So again, thank you so much for having me, Rona. I'm really excited for this conversation.
This is awesome. Okay, so we're going to get real with everybody. I think this is so important. This is the season of togetherness, that we celebrate togetherness. And I'm so curious about how we can communicate with more kindness and more intention, especially when disconnection and loneliness and emotional complexity are quietly present at the table, even when we're celebrating. So I'm curious about your thoughts on that.
Some of the initial thoughts, because I think we've all been at a table with our family and some family members are not getting along. I'm in the process at the moment of reading Mel Robbins's Let Them. And something that Mel says in the book that I've been practicing, and it really helps, is when you picture people like they are 8 years old.
Mm.
And you have to remind yourself that this is everybody's first shot at life. So if you're having a hard time with a family member, be it a parent, I don't know who coined it, but I love it. The beginning of your lives, you idolize your parents. They're superhumans. And then in your adolescence, we know everything. Our parents know nothing. We demonize them. And then as an adult, you start to humanize them. So I think it's really important to remember that it's everybody's first go and that feelings can be really challenging and messy. And in the world we live in today, society loves this idea of perfectionism and there is no mess and it's all good. But the truth of the matter is we're all winging it and we're all going to make mistakes and try to figure it out, which I think is why this conversation is so important. The kindness piece is imperative because now you're not just communicating, you're intentionally communicating and actively trying to show up better when it can be really hard to just show up, period.
Yeah. And a lot of times it's really about taking a step back from yourself, I think, because we're so caught up in the whirlwind of our own thoughts, our own emotions, our own ideas, our own beliefs. We're caught in this web of all of that stuff that's inside of us. And how we show that externally really matters. That's you and I have had this conversation. It's my belief that, communication is the behavior by which we are able to really show all of that and exemplify all of those things that are on our internal world, going on our internal world. So when someone says something, when we jump in and react, and by the way, this is a lot of what I go through in my parenting book. But when we react instead of thinking through a response, where we have cultivated an opportunity to take a step back and really look at the totality of the bigger picture and look at the fact that they may be saying something out of ignorance, not out of malice. They may be saying something out of not knowing the full picture of what is going on. And our kindness and stepping forward with kindness first, to me, means acknowledging all of that in your own head, your own body, before you step into that conversation. You know?
Yeah, I think again, it goes back to just building on what you're saying. What I initially stated, you got to give yourself grace. Yourself is, I mean, I am a perpetual overthinker. And I've learned recently when you're overthinking, it's because you're not trusting your gut, you're not trusting your intuition. So if you walk around in your head, sometimes you gotta, it's nicer outside. It's nicer to be in the moment, right? So sometimes you have to give yourself grace, but like I said, also give others grace because usually it has nothing to do with you. I think that's the four rules, four affirmations, right? Don't
Yep.
take things so personal.
Yep.
And it's okay if there's moments where you do. No one's going to fault you
Right.
for it. But it's more like when you have a moment, like you'd mentioned, don't necessarily react to respond. Are you really listening when someone's speaking versus listening to answer or listening to understand?
Right. Right. Oh, that is a very hard skill for so many of us.
I think it takes your whole life, honestly.
It truly can, and it's a practice. I always say, it's so interesting, to everything you said, I always say everything is a practice. Life is practice. We are really in practice of how we do what we do, the way we do what we do can always be modified, can always be changed. We just have to find the right road to walk down. And then we have to practice walking that road. Because we're
Mm,
not gonna the very first time anybody ever picked up an instrument, it's the rare person who's instantly attuned to knowing exactly how to, play that. A virtuoso is very rare, right?
right.
Savants are very rare. And the reality is we are not savants in life. We are rarely savants at life. We are usually really good at some kind of skill, but not necessarily life skills because it's all learned. It's all learned behaviors that we're picking up in the environments that we walk into and in the influences we have in our lives. And I think one of the things that you said about making mistakes because it's messy, it is really easy to get caught up in the whirlwind of our mistakes and then double down on them because we're ashamed.
Mm,
And then triple down, even as the part of in our brain is going like, "Why are you doing this? What are you doing? You know this isn't the right way to go." That part in our brain that just, it's like, "Come on, do different." But sometimes we will double down on that because of shame. Whereas if we just acknowledge that we had a missed take, as one of my friends says, she calls a mistake a missed take.
ooh, I love that.
And I love that. Then we can try to take it again. Just
Mm,
try to take it again. And in parenting, we call it repair. When a parent yells at a kid or does something that they really didn't want to do, they wanted to do that thing with better intention and it all fell apart and they didn't, and they were overly reactive. What we call the aftermath of is, and which is more important than anything, is repair.
mm,
And repair isn't just, oh, I'm sorry. It's, you know what? That was wrong of me. I did this thing and I shouldn't have done that. This is what I really wanted to do. This is what I really wanted to say. This is how I really wanted to behave. And I am sorry that I responded in that manner. Can I try that again? That's repair. And it's so important, not just with the child-parent relationship. It's so important for anyone, from people of leadership, from anybody any human ever born needs to take accountability for their
I was
actions.
just gonna
And
say, as you're
yep,
saying this, all the word
yep,
in the I'm just seeing it, it's like accountability, accountability. But if you
yeah,
feel shame that you
yeah,
could have acted differently, accountability can feel really harrowing. And I also think it's the idea of even admitting that you were wrong. people are quick to judge. I read an incredible book called The Age of Overthinking by Amanda Montell. She's a great journalist at The Atlantic, if she's still there. Incredible book. If you would like to read it as an overthinker, please read it. It gave me it was a breath of fresh air. She talks a lot about just, oh, I just lost my train of thought.
Those chains, they derail, and then we have to pull them back.
It'll come back to me.
Yeah.
She talks about how when you feel a certain type of way about something, we inherently will double down on it. And also human beings by nature are very judgmental. So when you discussed, we're trying to do better, the familiar, which may not necessarily serve you, that's where you're kind of waiting in this pool of complacency, if you will.
Yeah.
And the idea of trying something different, I think, kind of to bring it back to our, main question, right? Like the holidays, and you're at the table with all different family members. I'm very grateful to, be, I guess, a mid-year millennial. I was born in 93, and mental health is such, my sister's 5 years younger than me, and they're all talking about anxiety and depression, and it's not such a taboo topic of conversation. Where I think about my parents or my grandparents even, if you so much as said a word, you're complaining, or it was very much dismissive of feelings. But I think they were coming from such a place of survival. My grandparents escaped World War II. That there was no, if you addressed the pain, it almost felt like so harrowing that if you addressed it, it existed, then you'd get stuck there. So you had to think about everything ahead. So I think that's also something to absolutely acknowledge and talk about, is when you are at the table, and there are these, maybe like underlying feelings about certain things, especially, in the political climate that we're in, right? Everybody has different opinions. And you also have to think about everybody's tools that they have. And it can be really intimidating when people that are younger than you, for example, have such ease with talking about their feelings.
Right.
And you're older, and you have a
that
totally different sphere of influence and experience.
the older it is hard. I'm a Gen X, and I'm in a very weird place because I'm also extremely knowledgeable in mental health, and so it's a very different perspective for me. But I do know plenty of much older Gen Xers and Gen Z and boomers. You're right. It was about survival. Everything was surface level lived, because if we went deeper than that, we stepped into the messiness of it all. And people avoid mess at all costs. They avoid things that hold the possibility of unsurety, unknowing. Because that unknowing indicates that there might be change coming, and we fear change more than anything else, which is ironic because life is change.
Everything's around the
And by the way, I see two people made some comments. Sean said, listening to understand is not a default setting, right? As you talk about learning and offering grace. Well said. And Anne said, well said, Maggie. It usually has nothing to do with us. And love you, Ronas. We're rarely savants at life. Great conversation. Thank you both for those comments. I think when we lean into the discomfort, we actually have a better ability to handle the discomfort instead of trying to box it away. And when we do that with kindness for ourselves, not just for others, but for ourselves, when we say, I'm going to be kind to myself, I'm going to be self-compassionate today, and I'm going to open this box with care and concern and examine it. I'm going to look at all of the problems that keep coming up because I keep having relationship issues, and I see that there's a pattern, and I don't want to acknowledge that I keep hitting the same pattern over and over and over again, right? Oh,
I didn't move.
This is what happens when you're live.
There you go. I gotta talk more with my hands. Sorry.
Let the Italian come out. When it's funny, because just so everybody knows, Maggie's actually in a studio at the moment, in a green room in a studio, because she just did a show. So she's coming in from another show. And you know.
Which it was a segment about intentionality and
Yeah,
connection. And so it all bleeds into each other.
it all
But
does.
I wanted to say, Rona, when you mentioned about change, I'm going to make sure I move so we don't have a light situation again. One of my favorite quotes is actually on my fridge. It is by Professor Leon C. Meginson. Sorry, Mr. Meginson. I hope I'm pronouncing your last name right. It is a paraphrase on Charles Darwin's theory. And the whole idea, survival of the fittest, like that's what we always hear about, right?
Right.
Leon's take is it's not the strongest of the species that survive, nor the most intelligent, but the one that adapts to change. And even when I think about when I was a kid, I happen to be very tall, Yorona will tell you. Growing pains were the worst
Oh,
when I was a kid, up and down the legs when you're in bed trying to go to sleep.
yeah.
It's because you're stretching, because you're growing. But it was
Yeah.
painful. But I didn't die. I
Right.
I survived. I moved forward. And I also think when we talk about the messiness of feelings, and it's something I'm really trying to grapple with, honestly, because I'm a big feeler. Um, Feelings really are temporary. You've got to ride the
They
waves.
are. They are.
And it's okay if you're sad for a while. But at a certain point, and I think Yorona, we've said this, and if I remember correctly, you like this, reference because it's a nice visual. Some people are visual. It's okay to be sad. But when you're sitting down and you're sad, when you cross your legs and you cross your hands, then you can't get up. So feel the feels.
Yeah.
But if you I don't get stuck
Don't
there.
get stuck in it. Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing we do. There's a component to it, the physiological response that happens because a chemical is being released in our brains. That's what emotions actually do.
Mhm.
So there's a component to a physiological response, but if we try to resist it in any way, what we're actually doing is we're we're actually getting more stuck in it because our resistance is actually forcing us to take longer to go through it. There's an analogy to this that has to do with bulls and cows and stuff. This is really funny. But I had a friend once tell me that interestingly, when a storm comes, bulls go into the storm and a lot of cows
Listen.
just freeze and try to resist it and they stand there in resistance. But bulls actually try to step into the storm. And it's very interesting that and that might not be fully accurate. I
Do
just
you
remember
then
hearing something along those lines. But
do you just before you keep going, do you interpret that as a parallel to like flight and fight responses?
to a degree, yes. So our hyperarousal response actually doesn't just come in the form of 3 mechanisms. There are
Mm.
7 different ones. So, we have fight, we have flight, we have freeze, we have fawn, we have faint. I always forget the other 2 Fs. I don't know why. They'll come to me. But regardless, we have a number of different mechanisms in that hyperarousal state that we respond to. What's very interesting about it is that
Mhm.
to me, it's not about leaning in and fighting, it's not necessarily about leaning in and or freezing or any of those things. What it's really about is it's saying that this storm is coming regardless of whether you want it or not. So trying to run from it, trying to move away from it, trying to freeze, trying to huddle in, trying to find somebody to fix this storm before you get to the storm is less conducive to healthy measures of ways to handle the storm. Rather, if we understand the storm is coming, you can try to do as much preparation as possible, but the reality is the storm is coming whether you like it or not. So
Mm.
you might as well stick around for it. You might as well allow it to come because it will always blow past. And for a lot of people, when it comes to communication, they find it harder to lean into that storm of like, I don't, this is too messy. I don't want to have this conversation. Or I'm just gonna fight you on this conversation rather than accept that this is coming, rather than accept that this is what it is. Let me listen. Let me hear what this person has to say. Let me listen to their perspective and let me communicate to understand them better.
And validate them
and
also.
validate.
Like, you're able to validate somebody even though you may not agree
Yeah,
with what they're saying. You're able to validate people even if you don't actually understand what they're feeling either. I
right.
think a lot of people just want, I don't know how people are communicating with their friends, but sometimes if there's a girlfriend of mine who wants to talk,
Right.
I'll ask her, "Do you want my advice on this?
Yep. Oh, you froze for a second there.
Talking to me because you just want me to listen." And I
Yep.
really think people to listen, and just hear them because they're having a conflict where they don't feel seen in what's happening.
Yep.
And I think that that's a big part of disconnect as well, because loneliness is the symptom of the root
Yep.
problem, which is disconnect. And that can come from a plethora of things. It's not only necessarily your external environment, right? But it also could be from, misalignment, whether that's
Right.
the people that you're hanging out, the job that you're at, the values, if you're not being true to yourself.
It's very
All
true.
of those things can be, influenced by external, but the turbulence is happening internally. So
Right.
we need each other, though. It takes a village isn't just a saying, it's true.
We do. And it's really interesting you say that. My mother-in-law last night we were talking and she said she recently thought of this idea. She said, "Vent so I don't resent."
Ooh, I
I know. I was like,
love that.
"Oh, that's a good one."
I like that one.
And yet we also have to test the temperature of who we're venting towards. Because we need to understand, hey, is it okay if I vent this out to you? Like you said, if a friend is coming to you and talking to you about something, you say to them, do you just want me to listen or do you want my
Right.
advice? Things like that. Because you understand that from your side. But the picture has to be a full circle picture on both sides. So if someone's venting to you, that person who needs the vent also needs to communicate, hey, I need to vent. Is it all right if I do that? I don't need any of your advice. We need to feel that on both sides
Well, and we're
so that
talking a
it's,
lot about
yeah.
the venter, right? I
Hmm.
also think it's important to recognize, for example, you mentioned your mother-in-law, so I thought of my mother. There have been times when I've needed to vent, right? But
Yep.
there's two people in the equation. So there have been times where she's like, I just can't do it today. My initial, right, if you personalize the response, my initial response is, oh, she doesn't love me. She doesn't have time for me. Then a day or two later, you reconvene and you're both in the mental headspace to actually be able to have a conversation. And now, listen, that's taken time for both of us.
Right.
However, when you come back together and you're both in a space to be able to have the conversation, it's better than to full circle when you mentioned if we're forcing things or we feel resistance.
Right.
When you come back and you have the conversation because you're both capable, it's about both of you being able to do it. Now,
Right.
granted, it's not always that easy. Sometimes you have to sacrifice. If a friend's going through something and you're also simultaneously going through something, sometimes you have to hold space even when you don't feel like that you have the capacity. But I
Right.
just wanted to raise that. I think it's, and this is a practice.
Oh,
I think
so
it's asking people, are you looking for me to just listen? Are you looking for
mhm.
advice? But also, what I'm about to share is kind of heavy. Do you have the emotional bandwidth today
Yeah.
to take it on?
Right. And I think that points to the fact that we have to practice all of these micro moments
Yeah,
on a regular basis. We have to have small acts of awareness to allow us to pay attention to the I would say the invisible threads of human dignity. Because if we are being kind and compassionate and understanding to ourselves and to others, we can have the fortitude and the awareness to say, "Oh, I'm not capable of this today, but I would love to, I could I really wanna hear what you have to say. I care about you. I worry for you, and I wanna be here for you. Today is not my day to do that," you
right.
know?
And when you said micro moments, it immediately made me think of like A-OK and
Yeah. So
like, so
you
I don't
wanna
know if
talk
that was
a
an intentional
ah,
transition, Yorona.
well, I was thinking about this because your A-OK, which Maggie calls A-OK, is acts of kindness, and they are intentional micro moments, these little tiny things that actually aren't for others, just for others, they're for us. When you hold the door open for someone, and who's rushing in, when you
Compliment
when
somebody's clothes. I
when you
complimented this woman's outfit the other day, and she was touched because you don't know
yeah,
what moments led up to her day before that, right? So when
yeah,
somebody has such a reaction, but again, I can't preface this enough and emphasize this enough, as Yorona mentioned, it's an it's it's a relationship that is built on like mutualism. So kindness inward, kindness outward. Like
yeah,
it's not exclusively beneficial to one party. These micro moments and being the ripple is what I like to call
right,
it.
yeah,
The ripple grows. So,
right.
but you can't give kindness to others if you don't give it to yourself. And over here, it's definitely a lifelong practice.
Yes,
Especially
that
when we live in a world that's very critical, very judgmental. It's hard to
right.
be kind to yourself.
It is hard to be it's much more easy to be critical, and that also, it's funny, I always because of my background, I always go back to everything has to do with our survival mechanism, but a lot of the critical aspect of things is to figure out where we fit in to ensure our safety and security. And unfortunately, we've internalized that critical nature to a degree that can be very detrimental to for a lot of us. Where kindness grows, though, is that it's not just flourishing for other people, it's also tending your own garden. You have to tend your own garden with kindness. If you are trying desperately to give it out to others, you're gonna not have anything for yourself. Well,
Mm.
that's not very compassionate. That's in fact, oftentimes you end up building resentment because you're giving to this person, giving to that person, you're giving of yourself here, and you're not and nothing's coming back to you. A part of that has to do with the fact that you haven't built it within yourself first.
And sometimes not showing up to something, if it's kind to you, it may not quote unquote necessarily be kind to somebody else. But
Yeah,
is it really not kind, or is that the other individual? And it's okay personalizing, because if it's an act of kindness for yourself, something that's challenging and it's uncomfortable, but I think it's a part of it, is you have to be okay with disappointing people. And if they're your people, they will understand it. But it's
yeah,
also up to you to communicate what's happening. But it's also duality is a beautiful thing. I could be disappointed, but still love you. I could
yeah,
have still really wanted you to come, but understood that you couldn't. And if you're able to communicate that, the relationship can grow and everything ebbs and flows. I think that things have seasons and reasons, and there's
yeah.
lessons baked throughout every interaction that you have. It really is that deep. People
So
say
much.
it's not that deep. Life is that deep. And if
It's
it's
deep.
not that deep, then in my humblest opinion, then are you feel like we're alive?
Right.
You're so lucky to even be here.
That is very, very true. And that actually brings me to something. Before I say this, I do want to point out that Anne also loved the suggestion of of the person venting, asking the listener first if it's okay to share. And you're right, Anne. It would save a lot of friction in our world. The reality is that when we're in vent space, we're usually like it's like a boiling pot or like a boiling teapot where it's like, oh my God, it's about to blow. So sometimes it's really hard, which is why it requires both parties. If one person is jumping right into the venting and the other person is like, I don't want this right now. This is not, and that could even happen at the holiday tables. We're sitting around and people are like, just want to complain and vent about something going on. And now venting is different from complaining. We might need to get to that. But if somebody needs to vent and they just kind of immediately go into that space, it's up to the person receiving that to say, "Ah, I didn't want to receive that today. I'm not up for that." And it's
Mm,
hard. It's hard because the person venting feels like what you're actually saying is, I'm not up to dealing with you.
right.
Not I'm not up to dealing with your problems. You different from your problems. So this is where communication is key. And saying, I love you, I adore you, I so want to be here for you. And right now I just don't have the bandwidth to handle what you're throwing at
That
me.
takes a lot of courage
Takes a
because
lot of
you
courage.
also have to be prepared that the other person may not wanna hear what
Yeah,
you have to say.
really,
They
really
may
hard.
not like to hear what you have to say. There is
Right.
something I wanna note because we're both in the New York, New Jersey area, so
Mhm.
and you Rhonda, we've talked about this in, you know, pitching and ideating for my TED Talk and just in general how to show up with kindness.
Yep.
I think a huge factor of why, because all these things are you have your immediate community. So I'm trying to inspire people, imagine how you care for that community, extend a fraction of that to a stranger. And how would that work?
Exactly. Right.
We live in a metropolis tri-state area where everyone is very overstimulated all the time.
All the time.
So the idea of even helping somebody, it's like, oh, well, can I help them? And then like not become part of like helping them.
Right.
So I think that that can sometimes feel that way with family, especially if there are times at, a family dinner table if siblings don't talk or if there is, sibling competition. Um,
Mhm. Yep.
all of these elements exist. So when we're in, again, and we're both in a very niche area of the United States, but I think it's really important to recognize that sometimes people just have decision fatigue because you're just so
Yes.
overwhelmed by all the things. And I mean, it's the holiday season, and it's
Yeah.
also not always easy for people. People deal with grief, people deal with loss, people deal with
Yep.
change.
Yeah. And that's what I wanted to actually talk about too, is that when we feel disconnected and, disconnection versus let's talk about disconnection versus loneliness, right? Disconnection is actually the root and loneliness is the symptom. When we are disconnected from other people, we feel isolated. We feel like we're on an island all on our own. So we have to begin reconnection with presence and not perfection. Because it's so hard for people to say, I want to connect, but I don't know exactly how. And that's just it. If you wait until you know how, you're going to hold yourself off from connecting with your real presence, with your authenticity, with your real full messy self, because you're going to say, well, I'm not perfect enough to connect to these people. Well, why would you don't need to be. None of us are perfect. There's no such thing in my mind as perfection. There is progress, and I think practice makes progress, not perfection. So when we practice with, okay, you know what? I'm just going to try to connect. Just try. Just try to a little bit here, a little bit there. Gets easier and easier. And
I
then
wish
you
we
do
could
become better and better at it.
I wish we could reframe perfection as if you're trying, that is perfect. If
Yes.
you
Oh,
have
I
the
love that.
courage to try, it's not about the outcome, it's more about, like, the process and the fact that you're willing to even try. Because I think when we put so much and I'm guilty of this, so this lesson is a work in progress. We really do. We get so, invested and honestly, like, obsessed with the outcome where, like, we're missing the whole journey of it.
Right.
The segment that I was on today was talking about it happened to talk about like dating and connection. Um,
Mhm.
and when you're intentional, right? My hot take was, intention over attention, right? So
Yep.
even if you're dating to be intentional, right? And you're looking for like your person, what if there were other people along the way that added to the story? So point being is that, when we get so fixated on, what we want at the end, what if we realize when we got to the end that what we thought we wanted actually wasn't the best thing for us? And then when
Yeah.
you have what actually is meant for you, that's when you're gonna be like, "Oh my god, it makes so much sense." I think Steve Jobs
I
says it,
know.
life is a series of dots, and then when you turn around, then you can connect them. But until you've lived enough life, you can't
Yeah.
turn around and look at the dots because 'cause they're not gonna make any sense.
And I'm gonna say the reality is life isn't about the end because the end is the end.
Yeah.
Life is actually, in my opinion, about the journey, about the process, about the progress, about the daily living, about the being here on the daily basis and being really intentional and present here and now. It's not about the future. We work so hard to get to a future, but we keep going like this and we're looking forward and we're never seeing what's right in front of us and appreciating it for what it is. And we don't get an indefinite amount of time. That's the scariest thing, and I was listening to this there's a beautiful series I'm listening to right now that goes into, I'm not a super religious person. I'm a very spiritual person, but I'm listening to the series from Ecclesiastes, and it's all about the moral wisdoms. And it's very interesting because he goes through this whole process of basically saying that it is about the here and now. It is not about the end. And
So if
none of it is about the end because the
so
end is the end.
so we are talking about the present moment, right? And you're at this dinner table. And again, I don't want to make it morbid,
Right.
but we're trying to give people solutions or tools of how to navigate potentially like hard sit downs where again, like there's just different variables for everybody sitting at the table.
Yep.
The fact of the matter is you don't know if that table is going to be the same next year. And that
Right?
doesn't mean swallow how you feel about certain things, but really ask yourself, is right now maybe the place to have this conversation? And that's not me,
Right.
telling anybody if you have a conflict,
Right.
don't talk about it. But
Mm.
maybe it's a suggestion of how to take a breath and really think about how you want to address what you want to talk about because it's all about how it's not what you say, it's how you say it.
Yes.
So if you kind of brief people a little bit and just say, "Hey, listen, and even just when you say to somebody, I want to talk to you, it's like, oh, no
I
matter where you
know.
are, work, your friends, your
I
partner,
know.
because we immediately think that there's something wrong.
Right.
So
I
how do you navigate?
That's really funny. I usually don't say I wanna talk to you. I
Oh,
usually say,
nice.
"Hey, I'd like to have a conversation about X." And so that at least they know what the conversation is potentially gonna be about. When could we have that conversation? Instead of saying, "I'd like to talk," there's a connotation in the word talk, which is that one person's gonna be doing the speaking and the other person's gonna be doing the listening. Whereas having a conversation requires all
Introduces
parties,
dialogue,
right? And so
right?
it's like, let's have a conversation. Let's not just have one person monologue all the crap that they need to spill out. And and you're absolutely right. As soon as somebody says those words, we get anxiety driven. So instead, you come right out with and just try to figure out one or two words that gives you a broad scope of understanding of what the conversation is going to be about. Hey, I want to have a conversation about our Friday nights. I noticed that we aren't doing them as much as we used to, or something. Are doing our date nights, Friday nights, as much as we used to, and I really want to have a conversation with you about that. Is that cool? And if is it now a good time or is a different time a good time? Now this by the way works really well in leadership management and things of that nature. When you are a manager, when you are a leader, when you are an executive, when you are anybody who's above other people, the best thing you can do is allay the fears of others by giving them an idea of what the conversation is going to be about, and then asking them for when that conversation can take place. Because again, if we go back to what we said before, sometimes we're not in a space to hear somebody vent. Sometimes we're not in a space to receive critical information or feedback. Sometimes we need to be prepared to be in a space, in a headspace where we can actually receive that. Now, that being said, we're rarely ever prepared for a family dinner because we don't know what's going to happen unless you have a really small family like I do. If you've got all the extended family, all the people coming, you don't know what's going to pop up. So, how do you get prepared to walk into that with openness, with presence, with kindness, with, um, you know, our communication keys in hand? I think that is much harder for a lot of people to understand. I do a lot of work with people around this. How do you walk into I actually have a talk called How to Expect the Unexpected. And it's
So
all about this because I'm giving it next week. I'm doing a presentation next week and I'm using some of that. I I think the thing becomes all about how you show up in that space without distraction from other external spaces and places. You are going there for with intention. So don't show up with an intention to sit on your phone for hours while everybody else converses. Don't show up with the intention to be engaged and involved. I think that can be really hard for people, especially people who struggle with connecting and who are discomfited by having a lot of people around. I have somebody in my life who is an actual introvert, and it usually causes him a great deal of stress to even think about going into a social situation. So for him, it's like, okay, who do I know there? Who can I like latch onto? Who can I connect with and be comforted in an uncomfortable situation? How can I express myself in a way that other people will receive well? Or how can I choose to, just be in observation mode? But the intention is to be there. And I think right now, one of the other struggles we deal with a lot is that the disconnection is coming from a source of the fact that we're constantly connected to other things, right?
Stimulated, right.
We're
So
we're constantly
the
connected to it.
we're all but also, I mean, the duality, we're able to have this call
Right.
virtually, right?
You're
But
right.
something you had said, just in terms of like, I'm absolutely an extrovert. But I love finding an introvert because I love bringing a wallflower in. That was also a piece of like A-OK and just be the ripple in terms of how do you connect people, right? So I know a lot of this conversation we've talked about the heavier stuff if you have any kind of familial issues or whatnot, but we just went through Thanksgiving, right? And something that I had a takeaway from, it wasn't even at my family's house, it was at a family friend's house, was that they had the whole family got together and played a board game. Now, if some people are a bit more introverted, right,
Right.
it's really important to give people roles. And even my godson happened to, for a very long time, was very shy,
Mm.
delayed speech. And my family, we are Italian and Irish, very loud. It's like you got to fight to have your your moment to talk, right? But I find that if you're at a table, whether you and you're on a, we've shared this, and if anybody here listening has like little kids, or just in general, my friends make fun of me. I do with all of them. If you could share like the best part of your day, the worst part of your day, and what you learned. Sometimes we're so focused on like having to say what like we feel, right? Because we all want to feel validated or seen or have somebody tell us like, yeah, that makes sense. You're right. When sometimes if it's just not the time, what can we bond over or have fun and just have it be just a similar talking point? So if
Yep.
everybody's sharing their highlight from the holidays, right? Everybody has a moment to speak. Everybody has to be quiet, be respectful, listen while somebody else is speaking. Maybe you'll learn something about somebody else at that table conversation. And then if you transition to a game,
Right.
everybody has a role. And then all of a sudden, like no one's on a device. Everybody, to
Mm.
your point, is plugged in and present. People are talking. You may have a little bit of friendly,
Yep.
game banter and competition, but that's the fun of it, right? So,
Right.
how do we create those micro moments when
Mhm.
people can connect with one another across age groups, demographics? You have in-laws, you have cousins,
Yep.
it makes the uncomfortable part, it almost like dissolves the heaviness of it. And
Right.
then everybody's just a kid and everybody's just back to everybody being an 8-year-old.
Yeah.
Everybody's just like having a good time and it's just like joyful. And I
Mhm.
don't want to be dismissive of the fact that holidays are hard for a lot of
Right.
people for so
Right.
many different reasons. But like you said, we only have the here and now. So what can we do to make it fun and involve everyone?
And I agree, and I think that it's really important to acknowledge that we do need to respect the emotional complexities at gatherings. So, because not everyone is gonna arrive joyful, there may be there may be grief, there may be discomfort, there may be, just differences that we are realizing, oh, we're divided politically or we're divided, respectfully divided because of our different views on XYZ.
Or a family situation that happened. Like there was
Right,
something horrible that happened in the family and it
right,
divides the family. Sometimes you have to ask yourself, would so and so, who the divide was about, would they
right.
be happy that we're not talking to each other?
Right.
Probably
And so
not.
and so it's vital to create space for those things to be there as well. Even if nobody discusses it openly, acknowledging it and respecting it, can be done silently and allow that space to be there. I think it's really interesting because we're in a place and a time, with technology, and yes, you and I are using technology, but see, I think this way of using technology is a beautiful thing. This is a
'Cause it's a
tool,
tool.
right?
It's a
We're
tool.
using it
It's
as a
not
tool.
a reason
We're
to
not
tap
using it
out.
obsessive right, we're not
Yeah.
using it to disconnect, we're actually using it to connect. And I think that's really important. And because of the way technology is so pervasive in society right now, with social media and things like that, and we're so obsessed with that visibility, we forget to actively see others. There's a difference between seeing somebody and actively seeing them.
But how do you allow yourself to be seen? Because that's very vulnerable.
It is. I actually had somebody say to me the other day that I am really good at that. And a big part of that is because, you know, in all honesty, I no longer worry and fear what others think of me, because I usually say to them, I usually say to myself in my head, that's a them issue. If they have an issue with me, like if they have somebody once made a comment that I was too nice. And I thought to myself, well, you know what? That's a them issue. That's a her issue. She doesn't like my niceness, but that's a her issue. I am perfectly happy with being as nice as I am. I am perfectly happy with being as kind as I am. I'm good with that. I'm very happy to be the person that I am. And I grow every single day from it. But I think we get so scared of being actually seen by others because we're afraid of rejection. And a big part of that comes from our psychological survival response, which says that we have that need to belong, to be accepted, and to be appreciated. Here's the thing, though, we don't have to belong, be accepted, or appreciated by everyone, only by those that matter to us.
Yeah, and what if you're, if everybody's trying to fit in, what if you were born to stand out? You're
Yeah,
not supposed to fit in, right? And
exactly.
it's funny you mentioned rejection on the subway on my way down here. Literally, as I'm zooming past the stations, there was a subway ad and it said how rejection is a blessing. And it goes into that whole phrase I'm sure everybody's familiar with, rejection is redirection. Again, full circle. Maybe the thing that you thought you wanted isn't actually what was best for you. And at a
Right.
certain point, you have to, I think, surrender to the fact that you don't know. But it's
Mm.
very uncomfortable not knowing. But it's also
Yes.
everything around us changes. The trees, they just let go of the leaves and then they
Right.
bloom in the spring.
I love that.
But we'll carry baggage with us our whole lives because
We
we've
will.
gotten the baggage almost becomes your armor, right?
Right.
And I also think that's really challenging, again, just to bring us back full circle about family and different ages and generations.
Mhm.
It's really intimidating when somebody else has these tools. I have a grandfather who's older, and he started to be more vulnerable about the hard things in his life, and we had no idea. So being able to be vulnerable, I think also it really depends on not only where you're at with being able to like share that, but I think it's also, like I said, you take your
Mhm.
armor off and like trust that you're safe. You're
Right.
safe to be able to do that.
I think the reason why we're so disconnected is because we think we have to show up perfectly, like what we were saying before. But I think what's so important to understand about connection is that we don't always have to agree with the people we're connecting with.
You have
Agree
to respect each other.
goal, we just simply have to respect. You can love someone and you can disagree with them. And
Mhm.
honestly, emotional maturity means honoring autonomy without demanding alignment. We don't have to demand alignment. We don't have to be in perfect alignment, but we can respect other people for who they just simply because they're another human. And that is just as possible with our family and friends who we are, we have I believe a big issue is that we've projected this idea that families are perfect and that they all are in this beautiful, like, Leave It to Beaver. So I'm totally dating myself now.
I know Leave It to Beaver.
Okay.
Not that old.
This whole situation of like, oh, everybody gets along and everybody's so perfect and we all agree on exactly X, Y, and Z. And the reality is that even in our own tribes, it's so much messier than that. It's so much messier than that. When we accept that it's that messy, we can respect that it is that messy. And we don't have to be in our groupings, in our families, and at everybody to to each his own, that famous saying. Everybody has their own view, their own perspective, their own opinions, their own beliefs, their own thought patterns. And all we have to do is simply respect the fact that somebody else is different than us. And we can move on from there.
Hot take and a question.
Yeah. We'll end
Do you
with this
think
one.
do you think that the reason why that's something so hard for us to grapple with, just in terms of that, because that societal expectation has existed forever,
Mhm.
that everything is just, perfect.
Yeah.
Is it because we grapple with our own relationships of like control, whether it's like how we control ourselves, the idea that we don't have control over
Yeah.
other people, this fight to kind of like control what's happening, because if I can control what's happening, then does the control element
Yeah.
correlate
Oh, very
with
much so.
the gripe of uncertainty and change?
Yes, very much so. Control, the fallacy of control is all about where perfection stands. When we believe we have to control everything, so we have to know the unknowable, meaning we have to know the outcome of what's going to X, Y, Z. Now, there are certain things that we can have a better idea of what the outcome is going to be, but we cannot have a perfect knowing of what the outcome is going to be because we cannot control for all things.
Mm,
However, because of our survival instinct says that if we can control everything, then we can survive it. We can live through it. The reality is that it's not possible. But when we get comfortable with the fact that it's not possible to know the exact outcome of where, if we start from here and we're trying to get to here, we can prepare as much as possible, but we never know if some external force is going to throw a boulder in our path. If some external force, we never know when that's going to happen. So I always tell people, you cannot control the things that happen to you in your life, but you can control your response to it. So if we can get more control over how we respond in that moment, when someone throws that boulder in, we will be a lot more capable of recovering and continuing forward to our goal. And that's more of the problem, because that fallacy of control is what makes a lot of people even afraid to even try to reach a goal in the first place, even afraid to just try to do the thing that they know. Some people will opt out of the dinner with their family because they're like, I don't know how it's going to go. His cousin this has this new opinion on that. I just saw on Facebook they posted this. My brother-in-law, blah, 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 has been mouthing off about X, Y. I don't know how that's going to go, so I don't even want to go to the party. And then they forget the whole intention, the whole reason for that
mhm.
gathering. So instead of trying to control the outcome of that gathering, just work on controlling your response to it.
And again, just remind each other that
Yep.
it's everybody's first time living life and doing
Yep.
life, and also be just gracious that just like I think we're supposed to change. Like, yes, I think it's great when you haven't seen somebody in a long time, like, oh my God, you're the same. I think your core essence can remain true throughout your life. But I do think that if you're not evolving and changing, like, are you really
You're really
nothing
growing.
against it if you stay the same your whole life, but I think that's a part of the journey is
Right.
really like being alive and taking in,
And growth.
all the
Yeah.
things and evolving on your
I love
way.
that.
And that sort of change is good.
It is. Change is good. It is good. And if we can get more people to understand that, and to be kind to themselves and others when that's happening, I think that's really at the heart of it all. Just be kind to yourself when change is happening. Be kind to others when change is happening for them, and you will lean into the change a lot more strongly. Okay. Well, if anybody couldn't tell, Maggie and I can go on for hours, just so you know. And we've gone on for hours before, and now we're coming to almost an hour. So I do want to end on a very important note, which is that during this holiday time, it can be really hard for a lot of people. That disconnection and loneliness can feel greater than ever. The divide can feel greater than ever before, People can be going through a lot in their lives, traumas, a lot of discomforts, a lot of pain, a lot of struggles. And I really want to extend a reminder that you are not alone, that there are people in this world, whether they are familiar to you or complete strangers, who care about you simply because you exist. And I'm going to leave it on this last note, which is simply to say that you exist, therefore you matter. Your existence matters in the world. Maybe you can't see the reason why, and that's okay. So if you're feeling and experiencing great deep wells of disconnection and loneliness and despair, please reach out to others. There are so many supports in this time that we have. Do a quick Google search. At this rate, it's easy. And if it's not, just look to another human being that's around the corner and say, I need help, because humans want to be needed. Just like you want to be needed for and necessary for other people want to be needed for you. So I will leave it at that.
We need each other.
We do.
Thank you, Rona.
Thank you, Maggie. This was wonderful. And everybody have a beautiful holiday. Enjoy. And don't forget to be present in the moment.